film. So then after the war ended, the Muggles were
You say Voldemort exposed himself to all those Muggles?
The chapter titles were so good.
Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass.
How about that reptile house, right, guys? That's where they go. Harry talks to a snake. Piers Polkus is there.
Do you think the snake gets to Brazil?
People thought that the snake became Nagini, or the snake was always Nagini. Voldemort adopts this particular snake, calls her Nagini, and thus makes Nagini, which turns out to be false. Well, not necessarily, though, because Joe said that wasn't true because they were different kinds of snakes. Or because, what was it, a boa constrictor, and Nagini wasn't a boa constrictor. But that would have been awesome, actually.
Is it specified exactly what Nagini is?
I don't know if it ever is. I mean, Harry never sees a sign next to her, like, where Voldemort never stops and explains, like, this is...
Yo, Riddle, what kind of snake you got?
This is the cobra from the typically habitate Amazon River. I don't know. I don't know anything about snakes. Just trying to think of a good hypothetical snake to say.
It's the incredibly deadly viper.
How do we feel about Joe's portrayal of child abuse? In the text, they lock him in a closet and they make him do all these chores and they're verbally abusive to him, etc. It's not that far-fetched that they would hit him too.
They at least turn a blind eye to Dudley beating up on him as much as he wants. So
yeah,
it's almost there anyway.
Exactly. The part about this that I find so interesting is the fact that the Dursleys are sort of comical characters at the beginning here. Even if you're supposed to sort of hate them, they're also, I mean, they're just ridiculous. And also, it's not like we go from little baby Harry to 10-year-old little completely emotionally stunted Harry who has literally had no parental figure for his entire life.
Nor any pleasant human contact at all, from what we can tell.
Pretty much.
It does seem very unrealistic to me that Harry is as sane as he is, if not. The fact that he's alive at all is almost surprising to me, considering how bleak she paints his childhood.
Yeah, it's the difference between the bleakness with which he paints his childhood and then the how alright he is the weird thing. From sort of a political perspective, is there something wrong about Joe writing a character so unrealistically? Is there something morally wrong with writing an abused child who is just kind of fine? He goes away to school and then he never is just like suffering these really harsh repercussions from his outrageously terrible childhood. I'm not really sure how I feel about that.
I feel like the main conflict here is just the mix of how childlike and storytelling, and Mr. Tom will, I'm sure, say Dickens-like this first book is compared to how serious the later books are. Had she done this in a later book, it wouldn't have made sense at all, but you can kind of pass on it as just being this kid's story detail of this ridiculous character in the first book. It's that you try to tie the two together where it doesn't quite work.
I think one thing is, it's easy to sort of think of Harry Potter in general, like the series, as being about escape from the real world into the fantasy world of Hogwarts and magic. But the real world isn't very real, and I don't think it was ever meant to be real. Like, the real world is still this heightened reality and this cartoonish reality, where the extent of Harry's abuse, I mean, we're meant to believe that the Dursleys are horrible to him, but there are many real children who suffer things much more horrible than what Harry has to suffer in suburbia.
Well, that's another thing. If a kid read this book who is treated in similar ways by their family or step-family or guardians or whatever as the Dursleys treat Harry, they might be reading it assuming that at some point it's going to address all the horrors that he went through and he'll have some sort of emotional breakdown. That would not be unreasonable for somebody to expect that, judging by the way they treat him.
That is true, but I think it's also, and this is perhaps a flaw of the book, but Harry's just not a very emotionally real person in any sense in book one. And I feel like in book 3, Harry is feeling the emotions toward Sirius Black, like the rage and like the deep, hatred and desire to even kill that he probably should have been feeling towards Voldemort in this book. And granted, again, that's a completely different relationship. It's a different character. But I think this book is lacking any kind of emotional realism. But these similar emotions that you would expect Harry to feel here end up sort of being coaxed out of him in different situations over the course of the series. And I wonder sometimes whether that might have been Jo deliberately looking back at things she might have done differently in the first book if she had known it was going to have the kind of audience it did.
So we're basically to assume that after Harry's 11th birthday, he was basically in shock for like a year because he was like, oh my god, there are wizards. He didn't even have a moment that whole year where he was just settled down and could think things through and think about how much he hated Voldemort. Versus a couple years later, he was kind of used to being at Hogwarts. There's a theory there for you.
That is interesting in the Mayor of Erised chapter, as much as he suddenly finds this like wealth of love for his parents that he never knew. At no point in that is it ever discussed his anger that he never got to have them.
I think there's a grand tradition of downtrodden British orphans, and not just Dickens. This is not a criticism that applies solely to Harry. It also applies to James of the Giant Peach fame and, all them orphans.
Annie, for instance, when she's abused by whoever that lady was, she dances around and sings about it. And like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, he wasn't an orphan, but the abject poverty that his family found themselves in was not realistic. So it could be that Jo is just following in this tradition of unrealistic people in horrible situations.
Yeah, I think Harry is no more or less unrealistic than anyone else in the world that he inhabits.
Well, I'm sure you could find some characters who you could identify as being particularly realistic, like Parvati or something. Just being some dumb teenage girl.
Yeah, okay, but only because we don't have any real knowledge of them.
It's almost easy to miss because of how much it's downplayed. Out of thousands of pages in the series, how many pages are there which actually deal with him being abused? This is one chapter that's something like 10 pages long that really talks about it.
That's just a weird moral question. If somebody has an opportunity to talk about something in a meaningful way, that is something that will potentially be read by a lot of people, an issue that a lot of people feel strongly about, then if they don't do that, is that necessarily a bad thing because it's a missed opportunity, or is it just like, well, it's art, so they can do whatever they want, and the artist should not be too concerned with potential effects upon people? I don't know.
It's clear that if you're a person who lives in a Muggle community who goes to Hogwarts, a certain number of your Muggle relatives are going to be aware of the fact that this wizarding community exists. And so I'm wondering if that goes on for X number of years. How long is it before it basically becomes an open secret rather than a secret secret?
It's a reasonable question.
Is it only relatives? What about close friends? If you have a best friend that you are leaving to go, you would plan to go to middle school together, but nope, you're gonna just disappear 9 months out of the year. Did you get to tell them why?
Very interesting question that she never addressed fully.
If only we could ask Hermione.
I'm sure there's...
I'm guessing Hermione did not have friends before Hogwarts. I think that's what we're supposed to assume there. In that case, at least.
That's incredibly unrealistic that she wouldn't have had any friends.
Well, she didn't at Hogwarts until they defeated a troll together, which, after all, is just one of those things that you can't help be friends afterwards.
Okay.
What about Dumbledore in this situation? How do you feel about that? Was it irresponsible of him to kind of dump Harry there and not try to find a better situation?
I'm not certain that he felt he had a choice because of the love protection offered by Petunia.
Mm-hmm.
It would be reasonable if Harry had been kind of pissed at him when he found out that he just left him there, which Harry never is. Once again, Harry having no emotion.
Taking this book on its own terms as just Harry Potter and the book one, Harry Potter and the Unspecified Stone, I would say it seems like his motives are for no other reason than the general notion that a child should be raised by its own blood relations, which doesn't make any sense. But taken in the context of what we know as having read the entire series, I don't know.
Isn't it at the end of this book that Dumbledore reveals to Harry that that's why he was at Privet Drive the whole time, was because of that Lily sacrificed her? Or maybe he just explains that in context of Quirrell not being able to kill him.
I believe he explains that just in the context of Quirrell and of the original killing curse. I don't think it's until much later that we learn about.
Because at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry briefly thinks that he would be able to move into Sirius, which we've later learned even if Sirius had been cleared, that would not have been possible.
Oh, yeah, that's why he has to
not have been wise, at least. I believe it's not till the end of Book 5.
Yeah.
That sounds right, yeah. Dumbledore is a pretty cool guy. We all like him, I like him at least. And I generally think that he knew what he was doing, so he probably... Mm-hmm. Then again, there's a lot of evidence against that, mostly considering the amount of times that Harry faces death. That's an argument against Dumbledore having any sort of omnipotence or anything. But
what's the technical rule, though? How long does he have to spend every year at the Dursleys?
I think
enough that he can call it home.
Yeah, so he had to call that home so that he would have the blood.
If he thinks in his mind of somewhere else as being home, then it's not true. Which you could argue that he pretty early on considers Hogwarts his home, so maybe that's bugged.
Well, but every summer he's like, I have to go back home to the Dursleys. So.
Right, he has to go home. He has nowhere else to live other than when he's not in school. It's the place where he returns to.
It is possible that Dumbledore could have...
I'm sure he had to live there because of the protection, but I feel like Dumbledore could have thrown him some sort of lifeline or checked up on him or something,
Yeah.
Rather than just wait till 10 years old and assume he was okay until then. Why not, check in at 5?
He had, Mrs. Fig watching him and stuff, so it's a little bit, but yeah, definitely he could have... I mean, the Dursleys would probably be really scared of him if he showed up, so he probably wouldn't even have to... he could probably just sort of implicitly threaten them, which would have been totally reasonable if he, showed up and he was like, hey, you know how you have that baby locked in a closet? You should take better care of him or else I'm going to fuck up your shit because I'm a wizard and you're not. I mean, he's just a wizard, but he's also just a cool guy, so...
Is he that cool a guy?
Yeah, I've never liked him that much. I mean, he's certainly not the coolest guy in the series.
I'm wondering whether I would get along with him. I don't think I'd get along with him either.
There are very few times...
I mean, he'd be okay. I would not hate Harry Potter, but I would probably not
resent
him out
him.
as a friend.
There are very few times in the books when we experience him just hanging out.
Yeah.
And I assume that when we're talking about getting along with him, we're just talking about, just hanging out.
Yeah.
Maybe some 2-on-2 Quidditch, some butter beers, maybe a couple fire whiskeys if we're feeling crazy. That's when I would get along with him. Oh man, that would be amazing if you got drunk with Harry Potter. And then you could totally open up to him and just be totally... you wouldn't be insecure at all about the fact that you're talking to Harry Potter, so you'd just be like, oh man, dude, I'm such a big fan. It's so awesome to finally meet you off. Gushing all over him.
This brings up the bizarre issue of I don't know who I am if I lived in a world where I didn't read the Harry Potter books.
Oh, well,
so.
That's, that's assuming that we're talking about Harry Potter as if he is real and if we live in his world.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think the books can exist and he can be real.
That's true.
Yeah, totally. I was going to say,
that's what I assume, is that Joe is just reporting on real events. You cannot disprove that.
Yeah, maybe that's what happened. So the first book was published in 1997, I believe. The Battle of Hogwarts, correct me if I'm wrong. No, I guess it might be May 1998 when that took place.
May 97?
No, I'm pretty sure it's May 98 because he goes to Hogwarts 91, 92, first year.
So are we suggesting that Philosopher's Stone was like a piece of pro-Potter propaganda that was released during that year?
No, I was just suggesting that...
Well, I don't know that any wizards saw it. I think they just didn't think to look through Muggle literature.
I was thinking that the war against Voldemort, when that happened in our world, the statue of secrecy was accidentally broken or not accidentally, but Voldemort just didn't give a shit. So he exposed himself to all the Muggles, but then that caused this whole other problem. So then after the war ended, the Muggles were
You say Voldemort exposed himself to all those Muggles? This is the most heinous of all his crimes.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Wait, did Voldemort have a penis?
I'm gonna say when he was a human, absolutely, because that would be kind of weird if he was just when you're conceived under the influence of a love potion, you are born without genitals, maybe.
Right, and the first time around certainly, but after his body regenesis and after he started selling off bits of his soul,
I mean, at that point, his body is pretty normal. Other than, I assume
he has no nose.
Yeah, but that's because, he was like that before he got destroyed.
Nah, young Tom Riddle is a handsome dude.
No, but what he looks like when he comes out of the cauldron in 1995 is what he looked like in 81 when he was blown to bits, because he was a handsome dude, and then he started.
Right, and that's what I'm saying I'm saying that perhaps through the process of creating the Horcruxes, maybe he didn't have anything to expose when he exposed himself to the Muggles.
That'd be so he's going for that's very interesting. What would you think as a Muggle? So first you realize that the supernatural that you've always dismissed as fiction does in fact exist. All around you there are these wizards, and not only that, but there's this evil wizard who is trying to dominate all the good wizards, and not only that, but here is his penis. But wait, no, he doesn't have a penis. I'm not sure my mind could handle that many premises.
I think you could handle it. It would fall right in line with everything else. You're like, okay, wizards, check. Evil wizards, check. Evil wizards have no penises. It all makes sense.
I think that's the point at which I would just, kill myself out of confusion. I would just be like, this is too much now. Why doesn't he have a penis?
Regular Tom is confused. Regular Tom killed himself in his confusion. See, now I want to do the Vanishing. The Harry Potter.